The Hotspur, which we trained on as the training glider, is almost identical to these two seats here, except there were about 4 more at the back.
So you didn't have a lot of room?
No, there wasn't a lot of room, no.
That's Ron Wilcox. He's 83. He's come back to Shobden Airfield for the first time in 56 years to look over a modern aluminium glider. And what controls have they developed since you last flew?
Not a bit. Basically, they've just got a joystick and the rudder bar, and they've got flaps.
Gliding at Shobden is of special interest to Ron because he himself learned to pilot gliders here. But what about instruments?
Airspeed indicator, that was the main one that you were really worried about.
I suppose the essential difference in design was this modern aircraft is designed to stay up, whereas yours was designed to come down.
That's right, basically.
You came in December 1943 here, didn't you?
That's right, yeah.
What was it like then? How much of it is left?
Well, the big hangar's still there. There was a big hangar over there. Is it still there? No.
Yes, yeah, that's used by Kingspan insulation over there.
The gliding club host is Mike Hayes.
There was another runway across there, yeah.
Yeah, kind of more north-south-ish.
That's right,
yeah,
yes.
the
What's
other end of
what's
those
happened to
trees.
that?
It's gone back to agricultural land. It's the other side of those trees. There's a quarry behind the trees, and then behind that is the big open space that formed the other end of the runway.
Was there a control tower?
Yes, oh yes, yeah.
Where was it?
Well, we had the caravan there, and the control tower was right where this one is now. There wasn't very much for a control tower.
What about accommodation? Were you billeted?
Oh, up on the top, the other side of that road that we came down.
In huts?
Yes, distant huts. And there were 3,000 odd people on this site when it was a glider training school.
When Ron learned to fly, he'd no time to spend circling over the Herefordshire countryside looking for thermals to take him goodness knows where. His was a much more serious intent, to deliver soldiers to World War II battlefields whenever and wherever they were needed.
A good glider pilot should be able to land a fully loaded glider within about 30 yards and stop.
The flight path, which made him visit Shobden for the first time, began in 1939, when, at the age of 22, he was on a territorial army camp in Yorkshire.
I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
I was mobilised at that camp in Catterick in July, the end of July.
So you probably didn't hear the announcement. How did you learn about it?
Well, I think we all knew it was coming. It was only a question of which day.
For the first 2 years of the war, Ron trained in the artillery. But his ambition was to transfer to the Royal Air Force. Eventually, his commanding officer sent for him.
He said, I've got something which might interest you. He said, there's a new unit being formed, which is a flying unit. He said, I can't tell you a lot about it at the moment, but it will entail flying and piloting. He said, are you interested? I said, yes, I would be. So he said, right, I'll put your name down.
How were you selected?
Oh, you've got to go through the test was the same it was for anybody who's going to be a pilot in the RAF. Precisely the same, actually.
And how were you trained?
We went to a training camp on Salisbury Plain, and we had the whole gamut of RSMs from the brigades of guards to drillers and discipliners. And it was very, very tough, I can tell you. You didn't pick your feet up 6 inches, you picked them up 12 inches.
What had guards drill got to do with flying?
Nothing at all, precisely nothing. A glider pilot, his training didn't stop when he finished flying. He trained on specialised things, demolition.
So you were not only trained as a pilot, you had other duties to perform?
Yes, well, you were trained almost as a commando. In fact, part of the training was the commando battle school as well. So that gives you some idea of the intensity of the training.
Every pilot has a logbook, and that records what he's done and where he's done it.
Yes.
Presumably you've still got yours. Can we have a look and see when and where you were trained?
Yes, indeed.
So this book must be, 60 years old?
Very on to that.
Pilot's flying log sheet. I see your number was 323350.
Very, very old, as you can tell.
Corporal Wilcox, yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to know my number? 22723301. They've had a few more men in since you joined.
Yeah.
So let's have a look there. You were training on powered aircraft.
We had to do a full course to solo on Tiger Moths. In my particular case, I think it was about 12 hours, 30 minutes.
Is that all you need to be a pilot?
That's right. And to fly a Tiger Moth solo, yes. I mean, the Tiger Moth was the starter plane for everything.
Right. And the last flight, solo 50, you spent 15 hours flying alone?
No, 15 minutes.
15 minutes?
Yeah. That's all.
Right.
Mind you, we were short of petrol in those days too, I think. This was fooling you. December the 13th,
1943.
1943, we went to Shobden.
To begin glider training.
Glider training on Hotspur gliders.
Let's go back to Shobden Airfield, where Ron is running his eye over a modern glider, with Mike Hayes from the Gliding Club at his side and me sitting in the cockpit.
No, nothing like that. No.
Sit on your parachute. And that
Well, Ron has declined to get in, and I think I understand why, because it was a bit tough getting in, and it really is like one of those go-karts we used to build when we were little. There is just enough room for my feet, and I'm not a big man. If you're a big man, I think you'd have your legs bent all the time. But what about instruments? What did you have?
Airspeed indicator. That was the main one that you were really worried about.
You've got a lot more than that on here, Mike.
It looks a bit more than that, but because this is a soaring glider, we've also got instruments called variometers that tell us whether we're in rising or sinking air, which of course wouldn't have been of much interest to you.
No.
Apart from that, we've got a radio here.
Yeah.
No crystals or valves or anything,
No.
but pretty much does the same job. The instruments, if I can just reach over here, we've got these variometers.
Yeah.
We have a mechanical one.
Yes.
Basically, if the needle's up above the zero, we're in rising
Yeah.
air, and if it's down below, we're in sinking air. And we also have an electronic one as well.
Yeah.
And so that we can spend more time looking out of the cockpit and less time looking at instruments, we also have an audio one, which if I can just switch that on, makes an excited beeping noise like that at you if you're in rising air,
Yeah.
and a moany
I
sort of
see.
droning noise like that if you're in sinking air.
That's your altimeter there on the,
Yeah.
on the left.
I just
Where's
switch
your-
that off because that will ruin the sound, I imagine.
What about the airspeed indicator?
Pretty much the same as you're used to, I imagine, calibrated in knots.
Yeah.
There you see it on the top left.
Yeah.
Might read something
it
like
goes up
5
to
or
about-
10 knots at the moment as we're
It's
pointing
about
into wind.
110, does it? 120?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
that's about right.
Yeah. Something we never covered was the angle of dangle.
Go on. Are you sure this is broadcastable?
Some bright person decided that there might be an occasion where the glider pilot had got to go in the low tow position. They attached a device, a string device, to an instrument in the cockpit of the glider, which had two bars, lateral and vertical. And if you got to go in the low tow position, because of cloud, you couldn't see, you could keep losing the towing aircraft, which is quite possible. you were supposed to use the angle of dangle. Plus, some people did some prodigious distances in these gliders. It isn't widely known, but 6 gliders went to North Africa from Tarrant, which was a 10-hour trip behind the Stirling.
I have to ask, how did you manage about the normal bodily functions?
Well, you just have to do it in the glider, won't you? As simple as that. But we used to use about, I think there were 4 or 5 pilots.
Well, it's the same with modern gliding. We do some quite long tasks and strive towards such things as 300-kilometre and 500-kilometre flights. And the call of nature usually appears, and we have tubes coming out of the cockpit and that sort of thing.
Could I ask what happens to it?
I'm sure it vaporises on the way down. What would you say? Yes.
Yeah, I would think so.
Can we talk about the gliders just a minute? How big were they? What was the wingspan?
Well, the Hotspur will be guessing a bit now. I think about, I think about 50 feet across, 45 to 50 feet.
And the fuselage would be somewhat shorter?
Yes, the fuselage was very thin. Actually, if they were pushed, they could get about 5 or 6 bods in real echelon behind the 2 pilot seats. The pilot's seats were one in front of the other.
And it was made of?
Oh, plywood and fabric on the outside, you know.
Could you stand up in it?
Not really.
Which was the larger glider, the Hotspur or the Horsa?
Oh, the Horsa, but it's bigger. Military glider.
And how many people could that take?
Well, you get about 32 people in with all their equipment in the Horsa.
That'd be a fair old weight.
Yes, there's a fair I don't know actually, I can't remember what the actual weight was, but it's quite a load.
So it didn't include anti-tank guns and things like that, it was just small arms?
Small arms and they used to take jeeps in them. We used to take anti-tank guns in there.
What was it like flying one? For example, how far were you from the tug plane?
I would say about 60 or 70 yards.
And at that distance, were you bothered by the slipstream?
Well, you always had slipstream problems. That we had a system whereby they had a high tow and a low tow position.
Now, I imagine because there was no engine, the only thing you could hear was the wind.
Yes, you get the faster you went, the more noise you got. But we had flaps on, quite big flaps on the Horsa, but they were operated by air compressed, with 2 big air compression cylinders in the cockpit. But with 80 degrees of flap, you could virtually come down into a 25 knot wind, almost vertical, providing you kept your indicated speed up. But if you got much of a load on, not got much to play with, quite frankly. In my logbook somewhere, I took up a gentleman by the name of Air Vice Marshal Whittle.
Of jet engine fame?
Yes, that's right. And I went to Great Whitley. It was after the war, and the Battle of Britain Day, I think, in September. He decided he wanted to fly in a glider, so I had the pleasure of taking him up. And he said, "What was I going to do?" I said, "Well, there's a fairly strong wind on today." So I said, "I think we'd do a dive approach from 5,000 feet." So he saw us we got up to 5,000 feet, and we got over the caravan at the end of the runway where they do control everything from. And I pulled off and put the nose down and put full flap on. And I tell you, we landed about 80 yards the other side of the caravan. He never spoke to me again.
Can you describe what it was like to take off and land one of these things in a battle zone?
Getting up is the responsibility of the tug pilot up to a point. But the glider pilot's responsibility is to make sure he makes it as easy for the tug pilot as possible.
So when you're on the ground, about to start off, you've got to take up the slack slowly.
Yeah, very slowly. And then, as he accelerates, you will try to get as soon as you feel that the glider is ready to fly,
At about a speed of?
about 65, the glider pilot should, at that point in time, take the glider up a few feet to release the drag on the towing aircraft and hold it there until he sees the tug start to lift off. Then he moves up, and he's in the high tow position, obviously. In other words, the rope is above the towing aircraft. So he stays in the high tow position, and he keeps in that. As the tug goes up, he goes up and stays in that position. And when the tug pilot's ready to make his turn, the glider pilot will spot that immediately and go around at him. So it's a fairly straightforward thing, but the big thing is if you've got a full load, you've got to make it as easy as possible for the tug pilot to get that power plane off the ground with as much energy and power in as possible.
Over what distance would you run before you became airborne?
Well, if you're on a military aerodrome, you'd these at least 1,500 yards.
So you're in the air and you're beginning to climb.
Yes, the flying height was round about 4,000, 5,000 feet, somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000, until you got near your landing zone. Now, it was rather important that we got down precisely where we should get down, and the target had got to be round about 30 metres, 20 or 30 metres of where you should stop. And that isn't very difficult to do if the weather's reasonable and there are no objects in the way. And a good glider pilot should be able to do that.
How do you know you've reached the right area?
Well, as I say, at 4,000 feet, 5,000 feet, you can map read your way in pretty well. And if you studied your landing zone maps before you go, which we had, it was fairly straightforward.
So, how would you come down? Would you come down in a shallow dive?
Again, that's depicted by what kind of opposition you've got. For instance, when we did the German landing across the Rhine, there was a lot of light attack fire at us from the ground, from troops. And the best thing you could do was to get down fairly quickly. You use your flaps at the last minute as a braking mechanism. We got away with it with that, although I lost my second pilot on the Rhine crossing. He had a bullet through the lung, so...
What speed would you be moving at when you're landing?
Well, with a full load on, we were doing about 80, not 75 to 80.
So that's about 85 to 90 miles an hour?
Yeah, something like that.
Do you have wheels?
Yes, we had wheels on the horses.
What's your biggest fear about landing?
Didn't worry me very much at all. Not get too close to the enemy troops, particularly if they were dug in. Keep a bit of breathing space between rifle fire and the glider, if possible.
What about those telegraph poles I remember seeing stuck up all over the area?
Well, very fortunately for us, the German mind is very regimented, and they put them in straight lines about, I should think, about 60, 70 feet apart, which was not quite sufficient to land the glider down, but at least we could take 2 feet off each end of the wingtips. And the advantage was we could slow a bit faster by doing that.
Was it a very tense period landing under fire?
Yes, you you don't realise you're being fired at. All you're doing is concentrate on getting the thing down on a flat surface and getting your troops out as quickly as possible. And you've got so many things to do. You're not frightened of it. You just get on with it.
Right, you're down. What happens next?
On D-Day, my job was simply to get back to UK, and I had a little chitty to tell me to get down to the beachhead and get back to UK. Obviously, if they wanted another resupply, they were going to use the gliders again.
So you went over on the afternoon of D-Day.
That's right, yes.
And you were back in England?
On the 8th of June.
So that's 2 days after.
That's right.
Well, let's now turn to some of the actions in which you were involved. And to do this, I suppose we ought to consult your logbook again.
Yes.
The first action you saw was D-Day.
D-Day.
Let's have a look at your logbook.
This is the BBC Home Service. Here is a special bulletin read by John Snagg. D-Day has come. Early this morning, the Allies began the assault on the northwestern face of Hitler's European fortress. The first official news came...
Yes, this was...
June the 6th, 1944, written in red.
Yeah.
What does it say?
Operation, base to France, Caen Canal.
Do you remember how you felt?
Oh, nice to be in one piece, get down in the slit trench and get out of the way for a bit.
But you could have been asked to take part in the battle, presumably.
I don't think we'd have fitted into the pattern at all. Not on the D-Day one, no.
I suppose there were a lot of empty ships going back.
Yes, the Germans were still fairly active with the bombing, which was a bit of a nuisance. I got onto one of these LCTs, landing craft tank, and that was going back. I'd just got on it, and a Ju-88, I think it was, came over and dropped a stick of bombs. The bombs didn't hit the ship, but the nearest one was about 50 or 60 yards away. But the LTC disintegrated, and we were all in the drink. So that was it wasn't very funny. And the mistake I made was the Navy came along with a destroyer doing about 40 knots. I thought, oh, we're going to get out of this very quickly. But he got more important things on his mind than picking a bloke out of the sea. We nearly drowned us. Anyway, eventually I got back on a landing craft.
You were back in England?
On the 8th of June. Landed at New Haven.
So when was your next bit of action? September the 18th?
That's right.
Horsa glider.
Yeah.
Staff Sergeant Clark was the first pilot, you were the second.
That's right. Base to Arnhem.
And you landed there with how many troops?
I got a mixed bag. I got a jeep and a signals unit and their equipment and the trailer and about 5 or 6, 7 troops. Special signals unit. It didn't work very well, apparently.
Were you there on the first day?
Yes, yes.
And how long did you stay?
I was one of the last people to come out.
Yesterday and this morning, our supplies came and they were dropped in the wrong place. The enemy got them. But now these planes have come over and they've dropped them right dead over us.
I got down to the beachhead on the last night with the evacuation. And to start with, they had some of these Canadian ducks, these boats, and they were ferrying the remnants of the division back with these. But the Germans had got it cross-mortared, they got the river cross-mortar fine, and it wasn't very long before there weren't any ducks left. Anyway, I've been put in charge of a spot where there were Polish airborne and the British airborne all lying in the field in the mud and all the rest of it. The instructions were to put 14 men to a duck, and if anybody rushed the boat, shoot them. Anyway, somebody came along about an hour and a half later in the middle of the night and said, right, there are no more ducks. It's up to you. If you can swim well, I advise you to have a go at it. So I am a very good swimmer. And I swam the upper lek, but I didn't land on where I thought I'd land. It was about half a mile down. The current's about 4 knots. It's quite a strong.
How wide was the lek?
It's about 600 yards there, I suppose. The Welsh regiment was on the other side, on the Nijmegen side of the river. That's where I landed, and they pulled me out, and I went back to hospital in Nijmegen.
Were you wounded?
I got eye trouble. I had some blasted when Nobby was killed in the slit trench. We were both in the same slit trench, just near the Hartstein Hotel there. And the blast went his way, and he died very quickly.
You have lots of memorabilia, inevitably, about your war service, and one that you have relates to this battle at Arnhem. It's a photograph of the last orders given at Arnhem, and it was posted on the church door by Colonel Dickie Lonsdale.
DSO and MC.
Yeah. Can you read it out? It's written in capitals.
The position is, I have to withdraw you from the open ground by the river. I want you to rest here for 2 hours, in which time get a meal from what you have left. Get yourself clean. Be prepared to move up to a new position around the houses on the south side of the perimeter. And on this position, we must stand or fall, or fight to the last round. This edge of the perimeter is being held by a Lonsdale force consisting of HQ, ADIV, and CHQ. So far, we've had a good battle against good troops, though they are not up to our standard. We have fought them in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy, and at times, against odds. They were not good enough for us then, and I am certain they are not our match now. Get yourself dug in and shoot to kill. Good luck. Signed, Dickie Lonsdale. I think we were 9,600 went into Arnhem, and I think 1,200 got out.
What was your next action?
The Rhine crossing, right?
The Rhine lies left and right across our path below us, shining in the sunlight, wide and with sweeping curves. And the whole of this mighty airborne army is now crossing and filling the whole sky. Down there is the smoke of battle.
Operation Varsity.
So that was
The
March
Rhine
the 24th, 1945, the Rhine crossing.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the big breakthrough
Yeah.
in which we're going to finish it off. What's your memory of that?
Well, it was a fairly long glider tow, 3 hours, 30 minutes, and it can be a bit wearing because you get an awful lot of slipstream coming back from where you get a kind of caravan of of gliders and tugs in the air, and you can get tossed about quite a bit, so it's not very comfortable. And 3 hours, 30 minutes is about the limit, I would think.
We're coming up now to the exact chosen landing ground. Our glider's gone. We've let her go. There she goes down behind us. We turn hard away in a tight circle to port to get out of this area.
Last night, I believe you heard Richard Dimbleby's account of the breakaway from our glider of the big Halifax that was towing us. Well, after that, there was just a minute or two of quiet as the great Hamel car ran in with the sound of the rushing wind in her wings. Then, when just a few feet off the ground, pandemonium broke loose. The wicked snap of Spandau machine guns mixed with the slower bong of 20-millimeter incendiaries for just a fraction of a second before they started pricking out their trademark in the thin skin of the glider.
We had a very good landing, but very intense small arms fire from the ground coming in. In fact, I was in charge of this one. I was the first pilot, and Sergeant Hall was my second pilot. And unfortunately, he got a bullet in the chest coming in. So it was a difficult job getting him under cover, and we cleaned out a nearby farmhouse, and they put their hands up. There was a very big brewery at this place, Hamilton, and it was rather an important place because apparently most of the Gestapo, POW records and immigrant records were kept in this place. So they were very busy trying to destroy them, but we stopped that.
So this time you landed and you took part in the operation?
Yes. Well, it was a cleaning up operation, basically. We had all kinds of local problems. They got about, in this brewery, they had about 2,000 or 3,000 people that had been in these concentration camps and all over the place in a dreadful state. They had no food for days, no water. You can just imagine what it was like. And what we were trying to do was to get them fed anyway, and clean out any pockets of resistance that left. But we weren't long before the Armoured Corps were through to us, come across the Rhine, and they took over, and then it was on the way back, boys.
This time you went back to?
Where did I come back to? I went back to Louvain, that's in Belgium, flew back from Belgium in the Dakota.
And that must surely have been your last engagement.
I think that was the last one, yes.
Looking back today from this distance, it's 60 years or more, how do you feel about it? Do you ever think about it?
It seems inconceivable that it could have taken place for the reasons it did take place. One can't really comprehend the infamy of the German Reich and what they got away with. But it just shows how important democracy is, real democracy. I've travelled a lot since the war. I've spent a lot of time in Europe and Germany and France and Sweden, Finland. Spent a lot of my time over there, and I like the people. There's no reason why we shouldn't become a stronger force as a united Europe.
So it was worth fighting for?
Yes, I think so. As a united Europe, we're much less likely to be fighting each other and living in peace.
Did you expect to survive?
Yes, I did.
Weren't there even moments?
I think when they found out Nobby was actually dead in the slit trench, I think, why am I still alive and he's not he's not. And you know you can do nothing with blast. Nothing you can do when your head is stove in with the blast from a big mortar shell. And there's nothing I could do for him at all. But why the blast went his way and not my way is beyond, it's one of those things.